We're talking final episodes on this edition of Retro Serial. Hey everyone, I'm Ian C. and you're watching Retro Serial. On today's episode, we have guest Dave Sundstrom joining us, and we are going to be talking about final episodes of the TV shows we loved and TV shows that we thought were okay and all that stuff and anywhere in between. And it was a lot of fun talking about this, and we basically had the three categories of final episodes we loved, final episodes we hated, and final episodes that were somewhere in between those two extremes. So you're going to enjoy this episode. I enjoyed filming it and talking about it as well. But before we get to that episode, please do me the honor of liking this, subscribing to the channel, and share it on your favorite social media. If you're listening to this on podcast, please, by all means, write me a review and leave me a rating. That would mean the world to us here. And if you're interested in supporting us, you're always welcome to join our Patreon page, where you'll find two levels of support. The first one is the Cornflake Club. It's just $3 a month saying, hey, we like what you're doing over there. Keep it up. The second one is the Honeycomb Hideout, and that's $5 a month. But with that, you get most all videos and most all podcasts at least one day in advance. At least advanced enough that you can say you watched it before everybody else did. And if you want to make a one-time donation, we are open to that as well. We have a Venmo account. It's at Singularity_Productions. And with all that said, enjoy this episode of Final Television Episodes. Well, hey everyone. Again, as I always say, I'm not going to reintroduce the show because I already did an introduction that you have watched. But just to make things not completely awkward, we are going to be talking about final episodes and final seasons of the shows that we loved growing up. Both shows that we loved, and both the episodes that we hated and that we liked, and why. And I think we're probably going to talk a little bit more about shows that we liked rather than shows that we hated, because I think even though there might be a few of those in there, but I think we're more positive people. We kind of focus on things that we enjoy. And who else we're talking TV, who do we got with us today? Well, we've got Dave Sundstrom with us. He is the TV genius over on his channel. How you doing, Dave?
Oh, great. Having a great day. Thank you so much for the invitation, Ian.
I'm elated to have you here with us, and I'm going to be even more elated to do the Monday night and people can ask you questions. And Thrash Pondo, how are you doing today?
I'm dehydrating as we speak. The relative humidity is like a rainforest up here. I think we're hotter on Cape Cod than you guys are in Utah today. But either way, I'm starting to melt.
Well, we're actually getting some humidity down here in southern Utah, which is crazy because it had been raining. It like rained every night for a week or something like that. And I mean, it was just really, I finally got to experience what it is to not have dry heat, but just heat that you just soaking.
It's hideous, isn't it?
Oh gosh.
I'm doing the Sydney Greenstreet thing here from
no
Casablanca.
Fun at all.
Yeah.
It's no fun at all. Well, when we talk about final episodes and the things that come to mind, one of the things that came to my mind as I was kind of writing this out is I was writing down a lot of sitcoms. And I thought, well, gosh, I mean, there were final episodes of other shows too, like probably Hill Street Blues and St. Elsewhere and things like that. So, but a lot of mine are going to revolve around sitcoms, but I don't want to limit it to sitcoms. I mean, whatever it is, that's a final episode that strikes you. And I got a few of them that are kind of the most famous ones, but whether or not it's a sitcom or a serious show or a dramedy or whatever, it's an open discussion. We just want to sit and talk about final episodes, what we liked about them, what we didn't like about them. And a lot of these, even though I'm writing down all these sitcoms, a lot of these, they're tear jerkers because they're the final episode. And I think we need to start out of the gate strong. We're going to talk about MASH. Okay. When you think of final episodes, I think that MASH comes to mind. Now, Dave, you're a guest.
Yeah.
When you think about that final episode of MASH, how old were you when that final episode came out?
What year was that? 80.
I think it was
83.
So I had graduated high school. I was older.
Yeah.
And I was growing up, I was a big MASH fan and really watched it in repeats more than actually first run. Right. And really grew to love the first 3 seasons of MASH more than any others. So that may kind of give you a hint as to ultimately how I felt about the final episode of MASH. I basically, as I was thinking through a handful of series finales, I categorized them into loved, okay, or meh. And this is, I know you guys are going to be disappointed to hear this, but MASH, goodbye, farewell, and amen fell into the meh category for me.
Oh, really?
And it's really because, think about it, if you are a fan of the early seasons of MASH,
right,
MASH really evolved over time. And you mentioned dramedy earlier. And as the seasons went on, I really felt like it became as much a drama as a comedy. There was a lot of heavy material in the show, and the series finale was there was some of the heaviest stuff. There's a particular plot in there that is just, oh, good gravy. And I worry about spoilers, but
yeah, don't. I mean, yeah, it's only since 1983. It's only
40 years.
40 years old
right,
now.
Right.
So don't worry about it.
You know, the death of that child,
right?
Hawkeye remembers differently at first is just tragic.
Yeah.
And you know, it's meh. It's not hate. I didn't hate it, but I felt like this series finale, it would have been nice if there had been more of just a little lighter. It didn't have to, all of the things that people are critical of MASH in the final seasons, it delivered in spades. Yeah. And that doesn't mean that it's necessarily a bad thing. A lot of folks really enjoyed those final seasons. My brother is one of those guys that, if I remember our conversations correctly, he really enjoyed the Potter years and the final seasons and a lot of the stories that are heavier in theme and tone. I did not. And so for me, the series finale was, I would have loved if it had been a little bit more balanced to the humor.
Yeah, I totally remember that it being a very heavy show. I was really young. I mean, in 83, I was, 10 or something like that, somewhere around there. So I actually don't even remember, I remember watching it, but I remember not understing what was going on. Like, I didn't get it. Like, I didn't with the chicken and the child and all this stuff. And I'm like, did her chicken turn into a kid?
How did that happen?
How did that happen? Thrash, what did you think about the final episode of MASH?
Well, I was about I want to say 15, 16 when the last episode aired. And what had happened was they had started to air it in afternoon TV. So I started watching initially in reruns because I hadn't seen it in first run, but ended up starting to watch the primetime episodes because I was sort of brought in from the repeats. So by the last couple of seasons, I was a huge fan of the show. And one thing I have to say about the last episode is I wouldn't say confirmed, but it supported a theory I'd had for some time. Hawkeye had always been seen as this sort of scamp, this sort of bon vivant, this guy who sort of operated outside of the traditional spectrum because he was just very, very capable of not getting stuck in the mold. But if you look at it from another way, what if he's been crazy this whole time? What if he's been acting out not because he is protesting the military complex, but because he in fact has had some type of psychotic break, is just a very high functional person with a psychotic break, and manages to maintain all the way down to the end where there's that one incident where he can't get over the hurdle, yet somehow still recovers. And I remember my friends and I talking, because we one of the big topics of conversation in the late 70s, early 80s was the PTSD, was the soldiers coming back from Vietnam and being emotionally destroyed. And so we used to like wonder, well, is Hawkeye Gonzo? Is he in fact suffering from PTSD? And that last episode, I think, was you don't have to interpret it that way, but it became an excellent supporting tool if you thought of it that way.
Well, it does make you think. I mean, obviously it wasn't the last episode that he had that psychotic break. So it kind of makes you wonder, now that you bring it up, how long had he, how many episodes back can you go and have that, that kind of interpretation to it? Puts an interesting spin on it for sure. All right, Dave, I want you, so you've got some final episodes in mind. Yeah. Give me a love. Give me one you loved.
I'm going to give you one that I guarantee you loved as well.
Okay.
Guarantee it. PNC.
Okay.
If that's your name. Alex doesn't live here anymore.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So final episode of Family Ties for a couple of reasons. One, I thought it was a great send-off for the Michael J. Fox character. Mm-hmm. Really some good exploration in terms of Alex's relationship with his parents, and his sisters. But also, I loved, and I watched this live when it aired. I loved the ending where everybody got a chance to come out and take a bow together, and you saw how close they were.
Yeah.
And it just was a special moment for me. And I remember thinking way back then, and I've continued to think it about this particular television show, is that's how you do it right. You go out before you're not Happy Days. You don't run 11, 12 seasons when you jump the shark in season 5. And one could argue when Family Ties actually jumped the shark, if it jumped the shark. But Gary David Goldberg is a phenomenal television producer, and he knew how to exit and leave that series the right way. Everybody did it gracefully, all of the actors, and it's just a wonderful series finale. One of them that I really love.
I don't think it jumped the shark at all. I think they ended it rather appropriately.
Yeah.
And I'll make my comments on that last. Thrash Pondo, if you have any comments on the last episode of Family Ties, let me know. Or, say, now's your time to speak. Let me know. Yeah, type it in an email.
Believe it or not, while I was a fan of the show, I don't recall if I actually caught the last episode. So I must defer to those of you who did.
Yeah, no problem. I'll go ahead and go. So honestly, I did not see the last episode of Family Ties until much later, because at the time, it was the 90s, and even though I had watched it,
89,
was it 89? It was 89.
Yeah. But it's still the 90s. I mean, we're arguing.
It was 89. No, you're right. And so what had ended up happening in 88, maybe like just a few months before 89, we had moved from a city a few miles north of here down to here. And I was introduced to a whole new group of friends, and I was getting into my rebellious teenage years, and I was spending time at friends' house and going to parties and things like that. And I just stopped regularly watching TV. And
let's just call it what it is, Ian. You became too cool for Family Ties.
I don't know if that's really, I don't think I really became too cool. It's just that, it's one of those things that if you're not there when it's on, you miss it. You don't have streaming, or if you record it and then you just kind of forget, your life, especially when new things are introduced, you kind of forget some old, like maybe habits or something like that. So I missed it, but I saw it later, obviously. And I loved it. And it was really sad. And what's interesting for me is I've interpreted much of Family Ties through the lens of the relationship primarily between Alex and his mother. And now everything, not everything else was necessarily ancillary, but everything else was necessarily secondary, in my opinion. Now that could have been, filter glasses that I was watching the show through because I grew up with pretty much a single mom. So every episode, maybe I was just queuing in on that. Like when you get a car, the what's it called, reticular activator. When you get a new car, then suddenly you see all that same car everywhere. So that could be it. Maybe somebody else has a different perspective. But I certainly saw the ending of that show ended that way for sure. It was really that relationship between the mother and the son, and closing that relationship up and her being upset. And what's interesting is my mom did see that final episode when it aired live, and she told me about it. And it was, and it was just right at that time where I was beginning to, get out, spread my own wings, be on my own. So it was meaningful for her as well, because she had to kind of, in a way, let her son go and grow up into this new phase of life. As well. And even when I look back on it and I watch it, I look back on it, I think I kind of I view it through like my mom's eyes sometimes. And like, how did she handle this episode? It must have been very difficult for her as well. But I love the episode too. And I love the story, how it doesn't work out with him and Lauren. And this other girl comes into his life, but then it just disappears. But it shows that he wasn't ready for that relationship with him and Lauren to go that next level. Somebody, I think it was John Collins, suggested, what would you think about, what would you have thought about a spinoff of Michael J. Fox Family Ties in in New York? And when somebody asks something like that, I always say the same thing. If they do it right, it would have been great. But I mean, the big interaction was Alex and his family. That was kind of how it came to be.
It would, I'm in agreement with Gary David Goldberg at the helm. It probably would have been a great show, but it wasn't going to happen. Michael J. Fox's star he was too big of a star,
right,
to remain on weekly television at that point in time.
Yeah, right. Well, Thrash, you got to throw us out one of your you got to let them know favorite, least favorite, whatever. Go ahead.
I'm going to give you my favorite last episode, at least of this era.
Okay.
And that would have to be the last episode. And I'm going to give a hint before I say it. I watched it in a pub, and it was the last episode of Cheers.
Oh, okay.
Cheers is one of my favorite TV shows back in the 80s. I love the interaction between the characters. Even when some characters left and were replaced by new ones, I thought they managed to do so missing a step. One of my favorite characters was Coach. God rest, they lost him. They were still able to maintain with a very young Woody Harrelson.
Yeah.
It was just a great show, and I loved it. And I very few final episodes wrap everything up so nicely, and yet managed to not become saccharine. I mean, Norm, who's been unemployed for 10 years, he gets a job. Everyone gets what they've been looking for the whole time, and yet you don't think it's just something like magic elixir where it's like, boom. No, it's just things just finally work out for people. And in the end, and again, spoiler alert, but again, it's been decades now.
We're gonna watch it tonight.
Sam, he's leaving. He kills the lights. He's about to go out and lock the door. And what does he do? He adjusts the portrait of the coach as literally one final nod to Ernie Pantuso. And I thought that was very, very touching, because he'd been dead for years at that point. But he just say, no, he's very much alive and with us. And it was very, very touching. And I really, of course I felt good. I was in a pub while I was watching it, but it really felt good at the end. I really just liked how they wrapped everything up and gave you a nice, satisfying ending.
All right, Dave, got to hear your take on the final episode of Cheers.
First off, I've been to the Cheers pub in Boston. What a disappointment.
Yeah, the both
Uh,
ends.
yeah, well,
Yeah.
it's not right. It's the one I went to was the one that they used for the exterior shot, and it's just not the same on the inside, obviously. But that one falls into my okay category, and I think it was well executed. I don't disagree at all with the execution, and that things were nicely wrapped up, and they kind of covered everything that they needed to cover. But I am a romantic, and the fact that Sam chooses the bar over Diane, that was a problem for me. So, I think it's a well executed series finale, but I was kind of hoping that Sam and Diane would end up together. So for that reason, I just bump it down from loved it to okay, it was pretty good.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is interesting. Ones we love that the person thought okay, meh kind of thing. So it's all, I mean, when you're talking about entertainment, it's all a matter of perspective. I have to say it's a meh for me too. I did see it live, and of course, again, I was young, so I might have a totally different perspective on it today than I did then. But I thought it was, for me, Cheers was very unsatisfying. Number one, because I am a romantic too. I always like it when the guy gets the girl, and and yeah, they did wrap some things up, but it was. I don't know. It would seem to me, and this is the impression that I was left with. It left it as life as usual. That's kind of just life as usual. And he walks into the bar and he says something like, I can't remember what, he's basically alone there for a little bit. Then everybody starts showing up and he's like, man, no, I'm the best. I have the best life in the world, and to me, and it was nice of him to say that. But even at the time, I felt as though there was an amount of unfaced depression there in his character, unfaced sadness, a resolve to live just the way you're living, no aspiration, no. So for me, that's kind of the feeling that it left me.
For me, it was just that recognition that this show that I thought had been, at least at some parts, a love story between Sam and Diane was truly all the time, right before my very eyes, a love story about a man in his bar. That's what it was.
Yeah.
And that's how it ended.
Right. And by the way, I didn't think that it jumped the shark when Diane left, by the way. I really didn't. I thought that they did a great job with bringing Christy Alley in. And I mean, I thought it was good.
Yeah, the Rebecca Howell character was awesome.
Yeah,
very much so.
Sure.
I was more worried when Coach passed on, because I thought he was such an integral, I don't want to use the word sidekick, but for want of a better term, to Sam. But I thought Woody Harrelson really pulled it off. He really did. Totally different character, but he pulled it off.
Yeah. And I like the way they introduced Woody too, when he said they're pen pals. He says, "Oh, did you write to each other?" He says, "No, we exchanged pens." That was a funny joke. I'm going to throw one out that in some ways, well, I mean, I hated it. Okay. So, and I'm going to, but it's a bittersweet, but I mean, there were certain things about it I hated, but that's Three's Company. Three's Company final ending was just for me completely unsatisfying. It was super sad, especially the one moment, where you see Mr. Furley. The one moment I remember the most that was really sad was Mr. Furley was walking out, and it almost looked like he wanted to kind of stop and turn back and look, and he didn't. He just walked out. And you get so involved with TV shows and the characters, and they become like, people you become very emotionally attached to, but you become emotionally attached to them because there's something you identify with it. There's some aspect of your life that you identify with it. And one of the things that I've grown to understand over the years is there are a few occasions when you know that that something's about to wrap up, about to end. There's an end of an era of life or something like that. But there are many occasions where you don't know that it's the end. You don't know that it's over. It's just, you don't know when your last time you're going to see this person, or the last time you're going to visit that state, or the last time you're going to go over to that person's house or whatever. That's most of life. Most of life is you don't know when the last thing is. And so when you do, it's kind of an extra sweet moment when you do realize, oh, this is the last time I'm going to be able to visit this person or whatever, or, whatever closes up in your life. And so he realized that, in that moment when he's walking out. And I think you guys remember that moment when he's walking out and he kind of just pauses for a second and almost looks like he wants to turn around. But he wants to treat it like every other moment as an ordinary moment, because it's actually much more difficult when you know that it's the last thing that you're going to experience, or the last time you're going to experience that interaction. So it's, he made it easier on himself, which is just something that I've been able to identify with over the years, and have thought deeply about. I remember one time when, just to get, talking about sitcoms, but getting personal, when I was speaking at a church up in Oregon. A friend of mine was here, and then he moved to Oregon, and he invited me to go speak at his church. And I spoke at his church, and, it was great. And then we hugged and I left and all this stuff. And then a year later, he committed suicide. And I didn't know that was the last time I was going to see him. That's how most life is. Most life is you don't know when it's the last time. And when you're in, just that moment that he had where he realized, okay, I know that this last moment, but not wanting to face it. So anyway, that's my take. I couldn't stand the way they resolved the characters. I always wanted Jack and Janet to get together, the way they resolved that was horrible. So for me, that's one of my least favorites. Dave, take it away.
Yes. And I think as time has gone on for me, as I've begin to understand the backstory behind what was going on with Three's Company, and the decision the producers made to transition that show into a new show with only John Ritter sticking around, and with short notice that a lot of the other actors received, in terms of understanding that there wouldn't be any more seasons of Three's Company, and that the spinoff that they all thought would eventually happen wasn't going to involve them in any way. Perhaps the hardest hit was Joyce DeWitt, who, while I don't know if she thought that the spinoff would be her and Jack, the fact that they just so ungenuine, what's the word, disingenuous, unauthentic way that they wrapped up her storyline. She has this whirlwind courtship with this dude and gets married off. And I like it even less now that I know the real world mechanics that went on behind the scenes with the talent that was involved there. So yes, I'm there with you. And as I look at my list over on my other monitor, it is right there in the meh column.
In the meh column. Right on. Any words, Thrash? Let us.
Well, one of the things about the whole dynamic of the show, and I'm sure you gentlemen already realize this, is it was based on an English franchise, I guess you'd call it. It was Man About the House, which inspired
Robin's Nest.
Well, yeah, the mechanics was the same both in the UK and here. The American producers were trying to create the exact same dynamic, to the point where they even forced the Ropers to take their own spinoff, even though they didn't want it. Correct. And the Norman Fell battle with the networks is legendary. So he got the shaft right then and there. So the way the producers handled it, and I understand what they were doing, they basically wanted lightning to hit twice in the same spot. But to do that, they had to actually give the shaft to so many people.
Yeah.
And I found it always has a bad taste in my mouth. I mean, I love the series. I mean, Ian, you and I have talked on several occasions how it really started to limp to the barn towards the end. They were really trying very hard and failing to breathe new life into the series.
Yeah, they hit a dog from the Ropers, then later they hit a cat from Mr. Furley.
Furley, exactly, exactly. They were really grabbing at straws. So I mean, while I did like the show, by the end, I had pretty much checked out, both because of on screen and behind the screen shenanigans, I guess you'd say, for want of a better word.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Dave, back to you. Give us, it's your choice. Either one you loved, one was meh.
I'm going to bring up one that you guys aren't going to have much of an opinion on, but I want to share it.
Okay.
Simply because I don't think either of you were followers of this show, because it was a Saturday morning animated program. It premiered in 2008, starred Diedrich Bader.
Okay.
As the Caped Crusader. The show was called Batman the Brave and the Bold.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yes. This followed Batman the Animated Series, which is a beloved animated series that, and folks thought, holy cow, what are they doing here? But it turned out that it was a lighthearted homage to the Batman character from the 50s and the 60s. So that lots and lots of humor, never a ton of real danger, lighthearted fare, reminiscent of the 60s television series. And it ran for 3 seasons, and then it came to a definitive close. The series finale, which is called Mightfall, involves a little impish character called Batmite, who's voiced by Paul Rubens, who feels that after 64 episodes, the show has run its course and has nothing new to offer. So he uses his magic to try to ruin the show. And so it's one of these episodes where the characters break the fourth wall. They're talking to the audience. They do all sorts of tropes, television tropes. This magical little imp creates all these television tropes within the cartoon, such as adding a delightfully cute little child for the final episode. We've seen that done many times on television. And then when that doesn't quite work, he brings in Ted McGinley to voice a character that was beloved. So Ted McGinley is now the voice of a character that was already on the show, but knowing that Ted is basically, he's the harbinger of doom. Anytime he changes. And there are a number of, they decide to get he makes it overly violent because it's a children's animated show. So they create, and there's all sorts of mayhem that ensues. By the end of the episode, the show has been ruined. But there's this nice little send off, again, kind of a la Family Ties, where the Batman character comes together with all the characters from all 64 episodes. They have a rap party, and the Caped Crusader assures the viewers that he's always there to fight crime when crime is needed. It was just, again, I like I said, I'm sure neither of you have seen this one, but if I can recommend an animated show to go back and watch a handful of episodes, Beware the Music Meister, Chill of the Night, and then the finale with again Paul Rubens as Batmite is just it is such a treat to watch. It's definitely an hour and a half well spent if you watch those 3 episodes within that series.
That sounds awesome. That sounds like a really awesome show.
Yeah,
I just have never really got into the whole animated Batman series, even though I've caught a couple episodes of the different animated series, and I've loved them. It's just something that I haven't really.
Yeah. Not everybody has the temperament for cartoons, but I do.
Yeah. No, I have the temperament for cartoons. It's just one of those things I need to discipline myself.
Aren't you more of a Looney Tunes guy though? I can't remember our conversations. No,
I don't know if I'm more of a Looney Tunes than anything else. So no, I don't know. Not that I'm aware of. Maybe
that was someone else I was visiting with.
Yeah. You have anything to say about that, Thrash?
Again, not familiar with it, so I will defer to Dave's expertise.
Folks, check it out. It's awesome.
Yeah, for sure. Check it out. And Thrash, you're up. Give us you got to pick one. Hate, loved, whatever, and why.
Well, I'm actually going to go a little broad on this one. It plays to something you actually mentioned earlier. One of my favorite TV shows from the 80s. Certainly my favorite police procedural show of all time, of course, is Hill Street Blues.
Yes.
And just an amazingly well put together show, amazing ensemble cast, just across the board. But for some reason, and Stephen Bochco is famous for this, he loves to go off the rails. And I will never forget, to the day I die, I think I was in college at this point, but anyway, I missed the first couple of episodes of one particular season, managed to catch it, and one of the lieutenants, the one whose name eludes me for the moment, he was the father in Doogie Howser. Skiing, I think, is his name in real life, but he was Lieutenant something or other, and he's giving the morning protocol. And I asked a friend of mine, and I go, "Oh, was he demoted?" And they go, "Oh, no, he was never a lieutenant. He just imagined that he was. He actually was just promoted up to sergeant." And I went, "What?" Now, I don't know what the dynamics were because they kind of lost me at that moment. But speaking not as an episode, but as a season, how can you take the best police procedural show ever made and just go high fantasy at the end? And why? So this is one of my, are you kidding me? I guess you'd call it.
Right. I only watched Hill Street Blues on occasion. Wasn't a big fan, but so I'll defer to Dave. Dave, you got something to say about the final episode?
Didn't see the final episode, but big fan of Hill Street Blues. Loved it, and it's one of those you talk about age-wise. That was one of those where I wasn't watching a lot of TV during the final seasons of Hill Street Blues. But I do have a lot of respect for Bochco, but he wasn't, to your point, Thrash, he wasn't afraid to try new things, to do things differently. And that just sounds like one of those things that probably didn't work very well.
Right. Well, with that said, I'm kind of, because there's one I want to bring up, but there's another one too that I think on the heels of that I'm going to bring up, and that's the last episode of St. Elsewhere. For some reason, I wasn't too into Hill Street Blues, but I was into St. Elsewhere. Did it premiere like on the same night? Did they follow one another or something like that?
They were both on NBC. I'm trying to remember if they were on the same night, but
probably not. But, yeah,
it was just one of those cases where everybody watched the other. Like, for example, I watched both, and pretty much everybody I knew who watched either one watched both. So
yeah, but speaking of, this is a fantasy happening in someone's brain. You get to the in there, and then that kid's with the snow globe, and it's all happened. I was disappointed.
I just immediately said, "This didn't happen." Just, I'm going to ignore that even took place, because it kind of ruins everything for me.
It's almost like it ruined the whole show, it's almost like you have two stories once you get to the end of it,
Right. We need that Men in Black thing that you put in front, just 5 minutes of St. Elsewhere.
So anybody, you have any comments? Anybody have any comments on the last episode of St. Elsewhere?
Yes. Yeah. In 1944, I want to say, there was a horror movie where you find out at the end that it was all a dream. And that was very cool and innovative because you hadn't seen it before. It has become such a cliche. Anytime you do that, oops, it was all a dream, or oops, we imagined the whole thing, or oops, it's a cop-out. And I don't know, it would have been better to have just ended it without a finale than to have done that whole. I mean, I understand what they were doing. I mean, it's a snow globe. They were trying to do the whole thing from Citizen Kane, where he drops the snow globe in the beginning. I mean, I could kind of see the pieces were there, but for me, it just ended up as a complete and total cop-out. And for such a great show, to have to be like, oh, it's just some kid imagining it while he looks at a snow globe. It's like, are you trying to be funny?
Right.
I don't know why they did that. And yes, Dave, you're right. I think it just kind of ruined it minimalized the whole thing.
So flip side of that, and I don't mean to transition to another show, but I'm going to, just since we're talking about this right now.
Okay.
How did you guys feel about the ending of Newhart then?
You first, Ian. You first.
I don't know too much about it. I've only seen it in clips and episodes, but I heard that it's one of the more beloved endings. That because it's a comedy.
I think that's the difference right there, why it worked.
Yeah.
What do you think, Thrash?
What made it work for me wasn't the dream sequence angle. What made it work for me is he wakes up with Suzanne Plachette.
Yes.
It's Bob from Chicago who's having a dream about owning an inn in Vermont. You actually melded two completely separate universes together. And that was like, they made it original. And that's why I loved it. In fact, I don't know how many Breaking Bad fans we have today. Huge fan. They actually did a commercial for, I think it was Better Call Saul or one of the offshoots. But Bryan Cranston wakes out of bed like, I'm a drug dealer. And the mom from Malcolm in the Middle looks over and says, what are you talking about? Go make breakfast. And I'm like, they're actually doing an homage to Newhart. That ending, although it was based on the it's all a dream shtick, gave it such an original spin that it became one of the coolest moments in 80s television. Well, as far as finales go, at least in my opinion.
And while we're on that theme, it's weird because Newhart is a beloved one, but another one that followed that, which was also a comedy that people didn't like, that people hated, was Roseanne.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know why. I don't know what it was about Roseanne that people hated, and then what it was about Newhart that people loved it, thought it was just great and really good, surprise ending. But the ending of Roseanne, I don't know if everybody's aware, but basically I think it was last 2 seasons were all in her head, and even some of the seasons before,
in her journal.
Yeah, it's in her journal where she changed who was married to who and all that stuff, and it ended on kind of a sad note. Now for me, I didn't hate it. I didn't love it either, but I wasn't as mad about it or something as people were, but at the same time, Roseanne in total wasn't one of my favorite shows. I liked it a lot, but it wasn't. I wasn't. I guess I should say I wasn't as attached to the characters as much as I was to, say, like a Family Ties or a Three's Company. So I could kind of watch it just kind of whimsically and not be so upset about it. But I know people were really upset.
Well, I think the thing about it was the way they handled Dan, because my favorite character on the whole show was Dan. You might find that hard to believe. And just the way they kind of pulled that out, the rug out from under us, as far as that went, it was like it hurt us, and it didn't give us even a chance to cope with the hurt. So we ended with such a bad taste in our mouth. I think it sort of soured the season, or at least the last season, I should say.
That makes sense.
Let's think about what the shows were trying to do, since we compare it to Newhart, right? With Newhart, there's no attempt to create any sort of real emotional heft or a sucker punch, or you said, Thrash, it hurt us, right? Some of the things that were revealed. Roseanne, they were trying to do something more, and that's where I think it fails as a comedy, right? As a finale, is that there were some aspirations to, and maybe with some folks it worked. It didn't work with me. I preferred, I would have loved to have seen Roseanne, and it wasn't one of my favorite shows either, but I would have loved to have seen that one go out with just the same lightweight, happy way that Newhart went out, or maybe go out the way that Family Ties did, which covers some serious topics and things, and treat the cast with that respect and honor that they deserve on their way out. But instead it chose to go a different path, tried to really matter. That finale really needed to matter, and I think that's unfortunately was kind of its undoing.
Yeah, I could see that now. That makes a lot more sense that they put it that way, like why people were really upset, because there is that sucker punch that then you don't have time to cope with it. It's just, hey, Dan's dead, and hey, it's the final episode, see you around. See you later, and
have a nice life.
And turns out he wasn't really dead anyway, though. He's back.
Oh yeah, and then now the canon's changed completely, because it's
now Roseanne's dead.
Yeah, now Roseanne's dead and,
I'm so
and Dan's
confused.
alive. I think that last season is just non-canonical in my opinion.
Let's go with that. Let's go with that.
Yeah, but one of the things about Roseanne is I think that it hit a chord with people. It was one of those rare moments where Hollywood connected with people. Because if you look at like the families and everything on all of these sitcoms, it's all very like I didn't know anybody like that. Like I didn't know anybody like yeah, I didn't know anybody whose dad worked at a television station or whose, dad was a psychologist and mother was a reporter. And yeah, you know what I mean? I mean, every once in a while, but it wasn't my closest thing. It was my closest group of people. And then finally we got a show where, hey, this guy, he has a regular job. It's a regular family, and I think that's why it struck a chord with people. And then that last episode, again, I didn't. I liked the show a lot, but I didn't love it, and so it didn't really bother me, But I can see now that you guys are bringing that stuff up, why it would bother people who really did like the show. All right, I gotta bring one up. We went up on that, but I have to make sure that I bring this one up, okay? Because this is one I loved, and that's Friends, the last episode of Friends. I thought it was, I can tell already that I thought the last few episodes of the last season, they did sew things up. I was really happy that Ross and Rachel got together, and the creator of Friends basically said that they ended it, because it's a show about that time in your life where your friends are your family. And most everybody goes through that, college or your first, your single years kind of there right after high school, and that where your friends are your family. And that era of life tends to end when your family begins. And that's what happened. We had, we had Joey and Phoebe, who obviously didn't get that, but Ross and Rachel seemed to be, pushing in that direction. And Monica and Chandler were certainly in that direction. So I thought it ended fairly appropriately, because that era, and I look back on my own life. Yeah. That era of life ends when your family begins. And that's exactly how that ended. And it was sad, but you move on and you see those people from time to time. And it's weird how you can be so close to somebody at one time, but then 10 years later you don't see them forever, but you connect with them still. Look, I can tell, Thrash, you are biting at the chomp or biting at the bit, or I don't know what the expression is, to say something. So you go right ahead.
Well, there's two things. One, I want to speak to your love of Friends and apologize. I actually tuned out. I found the whole will Ross and Rachel get back together thing after about 3 seasons of it. I couldn't do it anymore. My wife loved the show. Daughter loved the show. I believe my granddaughter's watched it since. They all love it. I've actually never seen the whole episode. I do understand how it ends, but I am not honored bound to speak to it. So forgive me if it's something that you love, but I don't share the love. But I will tell you, you were referring to something about how it takes place at the time of people's lives where they're friends with their family, and that ends with your family begins. And it's very funny, because I was actually one of the last guys in my sort of consortium to get married. So it was like something out of like All Quiet on the Western Front, where each like every other month or something, another friend would drop out, and it became just sort of like me. Now, I've been happily married now for many years. A lot of my friends have actually gone through very ugly divorces, so live and learn. Perhaps holding out, making a wiser choice was the smart play in the first place. But I'll never forget. This is way off the topic, but it just reminds me of something. Did any of you ever watch a short-lived show called Happy Hour?
No, I did not.
It was sort of when Friends was at its peak, they were trying to do all kinds of incarnations of it. And this is sort of like the Married with Children spin-off Enemies, where it's sort of like an anti-Friends. It's actually a group of aging alcoholics whose friends have all started their lives, and they basically get their life as they get together after work every day and have a few cocktails and complain about their life. And it's different vignettes about, oh yeah, my boss is a jerk, or my ex is a jerk, and it didn't last long. But there was one scene in the pilot that always stayed with me, because I went through a very similar situation with my best friend of all time. His best friend gets married, and right as they're about to go on the honeymoon, the best friend's wife comes in and she goes, I can't remember his name, we'll just say, Dave, look, I know he's been your best friend since middle school, but he and I were in love and are starting our lives together. And I know there's been a lot of friction between you and I this whole time. But now that Dave and I are married, I just wanted to say, I won. And it's like, oh, I almost put my foot through the TV screen because I had literally the exact situation. My now former best friend's wife said to him, when he said, will you marry me? She said, I will, but those movie nights that you and Bob have, those got to go out the window. I'm like, wow, I was actually a condition in my best friend's wedding house.
Oh, how's that?
And I vow to no longer have late night movie nights with my best friend of 13 years. And I'm like, wow. So now the whole reason I bring all this up is in Friends, you mentioned Ross and Rachel, and of course, Chandler and Monica. They always have this pledge that's like, well, even though we're getting married, we'll still stay friends forever, like the last musical number in Grease. It never happens. And it's a very somber, sad, bittersweet moment. And I just, for some reason, I felt the need to read that into the record. Maybe that's going to be a killjoy. So thank you for indulging me.
It's a very realistic ending, in my opinion, and it's very sad, sweet, and I do love it. Dave, any thoughts on the last episode of Friends?
I'm more moved by Thrash Pondo's story than anything that
I am. Yeah, for sure. Right.
Share. You know what? I saw it. I think I saw it when it aired, and I enjoyed it. And I had kind of, it wasn't that I wasn't still enjoying Friends, but it felt right. It felt like it was time for that show to end. I wasn't clamoring for more. So it was a good send off. I didn't put it in my loved just because it's always been a show that I've enjoyed, but it's not my must see TV, despite the fact it was must see TV on Thursday for lots of folks. But yeah, I thought they handled it well, and I thought it was a great finale for those fans that really cherished it.
Okay. All right. One last round here. We're up against the hour. Let's go one last round. You can give me one you loved, one you hated, whatever. Dave, go.
I gotta know what you guys are saying first. You guys go first, and then I'll pick one of my two.
Okay. Well, what was on? So go ahead, Thrash. You go.
Mine's an easy one. Alf. Never forgive them. I mean, you can't end on a cliffhanger.
That was horrible. That wasn't a season finale. That wasn't a series finale. I'm sorry. They didn't know that was going to end, right?
No, they didn't. But if you're going to do that, you got to give them something. That movie that they did do, it should have been a direct response to that. Yeah. They flubbed it. They totally dropped the ball, and I have never forgiven them for that.
Yeah, me neither. The two that are still left on my list are Frasier and Scrubs. Absolutely hated the ending of Scrubs, and then they went on to do that extra 2 seasons of it. What? Yeah,
they did a different version. It was filmed on tape, right? On ABC. They moved from NBC to ABC, and then they used, instead of, it was a single cam sitcom on NBC, and then it was kind of like a videotaped version on ABC. So there was differences, right? You remember that it had a different feel to it when it moved to ABC.
Yeah. But that last episode was horrible. It was machine out of the box. If there's two people, I'm romantic. If there's two people that should never have gotten together, it was, it was JD and I forgot the girl's name at this point. I thought that that would have been a breakup I would have been happy with, but suddenly all of a sudden everything gets swept under the rug, and it's just a quick, hey, we can do this and we don't have to live by other people's this really lame speech. It was Dio ek machina. I think that's the proper term for it, where it just got out of the box. You can't figure it out, so you just say, well, it's just a miracle that happened. So that was one of my least favorite ones. Real quickly, Frasier was a meh for me. It was one of those things was just like, well, you used to imagine Frasier living his life. He doesn't get married. He's just out living his life. And those are the only ones for me, last ones for me that I had to talk about. Thrash, Dave says he wanted to go last. So if you
Thrash
have any,
did Alf.
Alf
yeah, you did Alf. For some reason I was thinking, okay. All right, Dave, sorry.
Okay, so I've got two, and I won't talk a lot about them because I think everybody has their own opinions about it, but I'll mention both of them. Star Trek: The Next Generation. We haven't talked a lot about dramas or science fiction. I thought it was handled well. And quite frankly, having watched 2 seasons now of Picard, I kind of wish it just ended there. We'll see what happens with Picard season 3, since they're bringing back most of the Next Generation cast for it. But it was the ending with Q, and I think it's called All Good Things. It was the name of the episode, was handled very well, as is, just Next Generation was a fantastic show. It really, I think, got its footing around the mid to second to third seasons and really just became something special. The other one that I'd mention, and let's see. I have 2, but we'll only mention one. We should probably talk about Seinfeld.
Oh yeah, of course. That would have been one of those that if we would have been like kicking ourselves in the butt to not mention the last episode of
They're just
Seinfeld.
Horrible people, and I'm glad that it ended with acknowledgement that they are all horrible people.
Agreed. Totally agreed. Self-absorbed.
Yeah. Yes. I had one more, which was Happy Days, and I didn't like the way Happy Days ended. It jumped the shark on the 5th season, literally. Yeah. And that was like season 11 or 12. I can't remember how many it ran, but Joni marries Chachi finally for the series finale. And it's missing so many moments that could have been there, that should have been there, including where, this was the chance to bring Chuck back. A missed opportunity. Bring Chuck back for the final episode. So that was a disappointment for me as well.
I get it. All right. Well, folks, I'm interested in hearing in the comments below, or in the podcast comments or whatever, your favorite and least favorite episodes. If you're watching this on YouTube, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and like and comment and subscribe to my friends here, Dave Sundstrom and Thrash Pondo Pons as well. And their channels will be linked in the description below. So please go over there and hit the like button on their videos and watch their videos, and hit the subscribe button as well. If you're listening to this on podcast, please don't forget to leave a review and a rating. Those things mean the world to us here. And if you're interested in supporting us financially, you can always hit the link below to our Patreon page, where you can find support there. And we've got a one-time donation thing for Venmo as well. It's Singularity_Productions. So if you want to make a one-time donation, you don't want to be on a list that, sucks $5 out of your card every week or every month or whatever, that's fine too. But if you're like, hey, I like this episode and I want to show them some financial support, you can do that through Venmo. All right. But before we go, just everybody, please tell us, I'm going to leave the links, but let us know how to get a hold of you on the interwebs. Dave, go.
Just type in Dave Sundstrom on on Google. You'll find it.
Yes, thrash.
For some, there's very few thrashes on the internet, believe it or not. So if you just do thrash, by the time you get to P, Thrash Pondo shows up. It's actually quite flattering. So just type in thrash, and the Ondo will kick in, and it will bring you to the best in vintage sci-fi horror entertainment, as well as some cutting-edge dad jokes, which I'm very proud of.
I'm glad you mentioned those, Thrash.
I love those dad jokes.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, stay safe and stay retro.